All right. So, welcome to today's session called Getting Back on Track, Planning Your Return to Good Standing. So, today you are joined by myself, Kate Romano. I am one of a team of 7 academic advisors in the Registrar's office, and we provide advising on your degree requirements and talking to you about programs. And I am joined today by Carrie Martin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Kerry Martin. So I'm a learning strategist and program manager at the Robert Gillespie Academic Skills Center. A lot of my collaboration with the Office of the Registrar is through the PASS program, which stands for Promoting Academic Skills for Success. And I'll be talking a bit more about that later on as a potential tool that you can use to, again, help you get back on track academically.
Thank you, Carrie. So, just before we get started, I do want to tell you what today's agenda is, and thank you for coming and taking the time to be here because there's lots of information for us to share with you. So, I hope you come away with new information and tools. So, today's agenda includes defining academic success, understanding grades and your academic record, managing your CGPA, which means cumulative grade point average, the PASS program at UTM that Carrie just mentioned, promoting academic skills for success, other resources and tools that we'll just point you to provide you support. And then at the end, there is a Q&A session, and you will get all these slides after this presentation. So you'll have all of these links and QR codes that you're going to see. And also, after this session, you'll get an email, not just with the slides, but asking for your feedback, just so you know. So as we go through, I would ask if you could hold your questions. I am supported today by 2 of our peer leaders in the registrar's office, and they can help with certain things in the chat and maybe sending you links, but all these links will be available to you after the presentation. So again, if you could hold your questions until the end when there'll be an opportunity to do Q&A, and trust me, your question will probably be something that another student has the same question, or maybe they didn't know and they need the answer too. So I do welcome all questions. So defining academic success, what does it look like to you? Everyone has a different idea of what they had as a plan coming in, and it may have changed. So I just want you to take a moment to reflect on what was your plan or goal before you came to UTM, and what did success mean to you? Was it getting into a certain program or achieving a certain CGPA? What did it look like? And what do you now need to learn or get help with to feel more confident about planning your return to good academic standing? It's okay that things can change, and you might be thinking about perhaps a different program moving forward or all sorts of different ways to move forward through your undergrad that looks different from what you originally had. So I just want you to think about, what does success mean to you, and what will your goals be now? Okay? So there are determinants of success. Now, while this looks left to right, and you might read, naturally we read left to right, this is not necessarily a progression of do this, then do this. These are items that would promote your success. One is staying informed. So paying attention to your emails. I know that can be overwhelming sometimes because you guys get a lot, but that's an important thing. Being proactive, and we will talk about this as I go through the slides. Being proactive is the best way to protect your CGPA, your cumulative grade point average. Planning ahead, being prepared, knowing your dates and deadlines and things like that. So you've got enough time to do things. And then assessing and adjusting your goals is really important. Changing your trajectory is not failure, but looking at where you're at and what you might need to do differently to get to a certain goal is important and a real determinant of success. Utilizing resources. So there's lots of resources we're going to share as we go through this, and that's really important for you to get informed and use the supports that are available. And then getting help, of course. So you're here today. That is one step in getting help. That's reaching out to the registrar's office and the Robert Gillespie Academic Skills Center. And again, we will talk about other resources that might be appropriate for you to seek help from. So I want to talk about grades and academic record first. This QR code is going to point you to the next slide so that you understand what a letter grade versus a percentage grade versus a grade point average or GPA means. Okay, so this is the grading scheme at U of T. So you can see here, if you fail a course, that's a GPA value of 0, and then it goes up, right? And you'll notice that there are percentage values that span a few percentage points that are the same letter grade and the same GPA value. It's important to note that because students often think, my percentage average is this, why is my GPA not that? And they're not apples to apples comparison. And then just as definitions of, what does a B plus mean or the ranges of B, this this scheme here tells you sort of how much are you comprehending, how much are you able to assimilate and grasp of the material. So this can be, informative for you right now. Where are you at? Are you inadequate? Are you good? Maybe there's certain areas of study where you have much more facility. So I do encourage you to look at this, and I'm just going to highlight um, one thing right now, and that's this range here, the 60 to 62, which is a C minus in grade, and it's a GPA value of 1.7. I'm highlighting this right now because this will come into our conversation moving forward in the slides. So there are three different kinds of grade point average. There is a sessional GPA, or we call SGPA, annual GPA known as AGPA, and cumulative GPA known as CGPA. So a sessional GPA is based on the grades in any single term. So the fall term has an SGPA, the winter has an SGPA, and in summer, while summer has two terms, summer has one sessional GPA for the whole 4 months. Okay, so we calculate SGPA at the end of December, end of April, end of August. Annual GPA refers to just the grades on one fall term and winter term together. Very important. The SGPA for summer and the annual GPA are going to be playing into the next things I talk about, so keep that in mind. Cumulative grade point average is based on your whole academic history from the time you start. Keep in mind, all courses you take for a grade are factored into your CGPA. So if you fail a course, that's a GPA value of 0 and a credit weighting of a half credit or a full credit, depending on the course. And that counts in the calculation of your CGPA. Okay. There are different kinds of academic standing. There are 4. So there's in good standing, on academic probation, academic suspension, and then we'll talk about the refused further registration. So if you're here today, you may be on academic probation, or you're on academic suspension, or you've returned from suspension, and so now you're back on probation again. Maybe you're in good standing. So I just want to review what are the requirements and how we assess each of these. So in good standing is for a student who has a CGPA of 1.5 or higher than that. A student will end up on probation if their CGPA falls below 1.5. So the first time that happens, you go on academic probation. You will continue on academic probation if you're studying this fall winter, and let's say you entered fall winter on academic probation. You'll continue on academic probation if your annual GPA at the end of the fall winter is 1.7 or greater. So I was talking about how that 1.7 is basically between a 60 and 62, but don't get so fixated that if my average is 60%, why is my annual GPA not 1.7? Because it's not exact one-to-one comparison. Also, if you were to end up on probation at the end of fall winter and you enter summer on academic probation, then if you achieve a sessional GPA, the summer sessional GPA of 1.7 or greater, you get to continue on academic probation. Academic suspension happens when your CGPA is less than 1.5 and your annual GPA is below 1.7 at the end of the session that you entered on academic probation, or your sessional GPA is below 1.7. So again, if you entered summer on probation and your SGPA did not reach 1.7, then you'll go on academic suspension. If it is your first time being suspended, you'll be placed on a 1-year suspension. And if it's your second time being placed on suspension, then you'll be on a 3-year suspension if you don't achieve these requirements. Students who return from a 3-year suspension who served the full 3 years, if you don't achieve these requirements again, so if you don't achieve this, if you don't get your CGPA to 1.5 and your sessional, if it was summer that you returned, or annual, if it was fall winter that you returned, if you don't get that 1.7 SGPA or annual GPA, and you've already had a 3-year suspension, then you will be refused further registration. Okay? So these are things to be aware of and the things that we want to avoid, right? So I want to just talk about some frequently asked questions and sort of missed bust for these, okay? So talking about academic probation and suspension. This is a true or false, and I'm going to ask if you can put it in the chat. So true or false, being on academic probation means I cannot enroll in courses in the next term. So if you can just, if you're comfortable, just put it in the chat. I'm just going to, hopefully this doesn't mess up my screen display. So again, if you're comfortable answering true or false to this question. Thank you. This is false. You can continue to take courses. Think of academic probation as a warning, as a yellow flag, if you like, that you must work to improve your CGPA, your cumulative grade point average. Now, it can take sometimes more than one academic session to get back to good standing, to get your CGPA to 1.5, depending on where you ended up when you were assessed. So you want to think about what courses should you take and how many courses you should take, and focusing on doing well. Again, to be clear, when I say it can take more than one session to get into good standing, it is the very next session that you enter when you are first going on probation that we are going to assess you at the end of that session. And if you don't achieve that minimum requirement of either the annual GPA or the sessional GPA, again, depending if you're entering fall, winter on probation or summer on probation, if you don't achieve the 1.7, that's when you'll go on the suspension. Okay. So next question, true or false? My course load will be restricted while on probation. True or false? If you're comfortable putting it in the chat. Okay, I see some people quickly responding to that one. Yes, this is false. You can take as much as 3.0 credits per fall and or winter term. So that would be a total of 6.0 credits. And in the summer, you can take as much as 1.0 credit per term in summer, because again, summer has 2 terms. However, we recommend if you're on probation to reduce your course load to no more than 1.5 credits per fall and winter term for a total of 3.0 credits over fall winter. But no, the reduced course load that we recommend is not enforced. It is our strong recommendation because we're trying to encourage you to do better, give yourself more time with your courses, and avoid suspension, right? We also don't recommend summer courses because those courses are compressed, and we never suggest that if you're on probation. You know, that's taking a 4-month or 12-week course, and in the summer they're 6 weeks long. They're extremely accelerated, so it's not conducive to success for every student when it's delivered that way. So we do encourage you to determine what's the optimal course load for you. And that means, you know, you might want to talk with an academic advisor in the registrar's office, such as myself, or a program advisor if you're already in program, specialist, major, minor, and you want advice from the program office, or maybe your accessibility advisor if you're registered with accessibility services. And we'll talk about that in a bit if you're like, what is that? Okay. Next question. Academic probation and OSAP academic probation are not the same thing. True or false? Again, if you're comfortable putting that in the chat. And it's really okay not to know. That's why we're here today, to learn. Okay, I will reveal. This is true. They are two different things. Academic probation at U of T, that status has nothing to do with your OSAP student loan. One is about your grades and one is about your finances and your success. Um, Academic probation is determined by your cumulative grade point average. OSAP academic probation happens if you drop too many courses or you don't successfully complete the minimum number of credits in your study period. So for example, if you were receiving full-time funding and you said, I'm going to do 3.0 credits this fall winter, and you drop courses or you fail courses so you don't complete 3.0 credits, well, it's likely you'll go on OSAP probation. I'm not a financial aid advisor, so I don't speak to details about this, but this information is available on the Registrar's website under the Finances section to talk about academic progress. Last myth to bust, hopefully, true or false. Once I receive my probation notice, I must get back to good standing within one academic term to avoid suspension. True or false? Again, if you're comfortable, please put it in the chat. It's not a trick question, but I will reveal the answer. This is false. To avoid suspension, your final grades must demonstrate that you are improving. And it can take, as I said earlier, it can take one or more sessions to raise your CGPA and get into good academic standing. So to get to that CGPA of 1.5. But your short-term goal when you're on probation is, as I say, if you've entered fall winter on academic probation, then your annual GPA, or let's say this happens to you at the end of this fall winter and you enter summer on academic probation, then it's the sessional GPA. So either way, your short-term goal is to have the annual or sessional GPA of 1.7 or above. That allows you to continue on academic probation. The long-term goal, of course, is to raise your CGPA to 1.5 and above, ideally higher, because to earn an honors degree, your CGPA at the end of everything needs to be at least 1.85. But that's another matter. So no, you don't have to get it done in one term. And I want to be really clear. Well, it'll come up in the next slides. Or I should just say, we assess your standing at the end of fall winter, not at the end of fall. We assess it twice a year, okay? So after April and after August if you're enrolled in summer, okay? So now I want to talk about some tools to help you manage your CGPA. There's dropping your courses by the academic drop deadline. There's choosing credit, no credit as an assessment method. There's choosing late withdrawal after drop date, known as LWD. And there's also second attempt for credit. So these are some tools that we have at UTM to help you manage your CGPA. Some are proactive, some are reactive. Okay, so I'm going to go through them one by one, but first I just want to address being aware of what is full-time versus part-time studies in terms of your course load. So if you want to be a full-time student, you need to be in at least 1.5 credits per term in fall winter. So that's a total of at least 3.0 credits. Summer is optional, so there's no requirement. But just so you know, um, that's for fall winter. The full-time status, part-time status would be if a student is in less than 3.0 credits. So anywhere up to 2.5 credits makes a student part-time. And I raise this issue because it can be important in terms of an international student who has to maintain full-time studies, or again, a student who's receiving funding that's based on them being a full-time student. So the tipping point to be full-time is 3.0 credits or more. So dropping courses before the deadline. This is before the academic drop deadline. The positives or the pros on this is it removes the course from your transcript, so it never appears on your record. There is no impact on your CGPA because you have withdrawn from the course. And there is no limit for the duration of your studies that you can choose to drop a course by the drop deadline. There's other consequences to doing that, but there's no limit to how many you could do. So on the right-hand side of this screen, Note that full, partial, or no refund may apply depending on the timing of when you drop the course. So you want to be mindful of those dates and consider if you dropping a course is going to change you from a full-time to a part-time status. Again, that can be important if you're receiving funding based on full-time status or if you're an international student who needs to maintain full-time status for the purposes of their permit. This is something you manage yourself on Acorn. Published deadlines are on our important dates, and you exercise your request to drop a course on Acorn by that deadline. So again, be mindful of deadlines always. And the link is there and the QR code is there. Again, all of this will be shared with you after. The next option might be if you've gone past that academic drop deadline to choose late withdrawal after the drop date, known as LWD. So the positives on this is instead of a grade appearing on your record, you'll have the notation LWD. So the course remains on your record, but you've withdrawn from the course, so no grade is reported, but the notation LWD appears. This also has no impact on your CGPA because you've withdrawn from the course, so no grade ever gets reported. It also, which can be important for international students particularly, is it doesn't reduce your course load. Okay? On the other side of the screen, there is no refund. By the time we've reached the late withdrawal after drop date period, we've well passed financial drop deadlines. There's also a limit to the number of credits you can choose LWD for, and that is a total of 3.0 credits. This could affect your loan or OSAP. That's another type of loan, right? So as I was talking about earlier in the Mythbusters, this could affect your academic progress if it's going to cause you to not be completing the number of credits that you would be required to complete to receive full-time funding. Also, consider that graduate or professional schools can see this notation on your academic transcript, and it might be a little bit of a red flag. You know, it's a question mark. Why did this happen? What happened? This is not something you do on Acorn. It is something where you submit the form on our website, on our forms page, or on our managing your courses on our drop page to submit the request to do the late withdrawal after drop date. Be mindful of deadlines, okay? Again, these are published and are important dates. Credit no credit is another assessment method we'll call CR/NCR sometimes. And on the positive of this, it does not impact your CGPA. It also doesn't reduce your course load. You're not withdrawing from the course. You are asking for it to be assessed basically on a pass-fail. So if you get a grade of 50 or higher, you get the notation CR. You never see your grade. No institution outside of U of T sees a grade either. If you earn a grade of 49% or lower, then you have the notation of NCR. But whether it's CR or NCR, it has no impact on your CGPA. On the right-hand side of the screen, there's no refund because, of course, you haven't withdrawn from the course. There is also a limit to the number of credits you can exercise on this assessment method, and that's a total of 2.0 credits. Now, again, consider that graduate or professional schools, when they're looking at your transcript, this can also be seen as a red flag, particularly in upper year courses or courses in your area of study. And this is something you do on Acorn. There is a caveat about credit, no credit deadline in that there's a deadline published in our important dates, but if there is no final exam in the course, then the actual deadline is when the final assessment is due. Now, if the final assessment is due after the published deadline for important dates for credit, no credit, then it's the deadline for credit, no credit. It's whichever date comes first. Okay. And just a last point there is courses with the credit notation do not count towards program requirements. So for program entry requirements or completion requirements, you don't want to choose this assessment method because then the course won't count for program. Okay. And the last way to manage your CGPA that we have at UTM is called second attempt for credit. We call that SAC for short. The pros on this is when you are repeating a past course, so not a failed course, but a past course, the final grade you receive in your first attempt, if you choose SAC, won't impact your CGPA. And the final grade you achieve in your second attempt, as long as you pass it, counts for the degree credit and for your CGPA. Now, by default, I want to make sure to be clear here, when you're requesting to repeat a past course, you're not requesting SAC. That is a second and separate step. By default, when you repeat a past course, the second course is marked extra. So it stays that way until if and when you request SAC and you pass the second course. Then the extra notation is removed from the second one and placed on the first one. Okay, more information is on that link. That can be a lot to digest what I just said. On the notes side here, you can't add a course that you've already completed on Acorn. So when you earn a credit in a course, you can't go on Acorn and add it yourself. You do have to submit the course enrollment exception form. Okay, so first you have to get into the course. Then if you want to choose second attempt for credit, then you wait for that request period because that's different than the request period to get into the course that you want to repeat. And then you'd request second attempt for credit. This also has a limit of number of courses or credits you can take on SAC, and that is a total of 1.0. Again, being mindful of deadlines, the deadline to request to repeat a course is different than the deadline to request SAC. And then just as a note overall, you can only repeat a past course once, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether you're choosing SAC or not. Any course that you've passed, you can only repeat one time. So if you repeat a course and you fail it, but you passed it the first time, you can't take it a third time. Okay. Now I have an exercise here, an activity that I hope will sort of help you understand, you know, progressing through a course and making decisions about, well, should I drop the course by the academic drop deadline, or should I um, choose credit, no credit, or should I late withdrawal? Okay, so I have an exercise to show you two options basically. So in this first scenario, I'll just go through this and sort of talk this out so you can see. This code in the top QR code here in the right-hand corner is the gradecalculator.com. This is not a U of T website, but it's something we refer students to manage their progress in any given course. It's a great tool for the computer to do the math for you. Okay, so in this first case, this is a course where the student requires the course for program entry and they require a minimum grade of 65%. So as we go through the course, as the term progresses, we look at the marks received. What was it worth in percentage? What was the weight, the value of the course, of that assessment? And then we do the math on it. Now, the grade calculator does the math for you, but I'm just showing you how this works. So in this case, the student does term test 1, they got 72, it was worth 25, so it's multiplied by 0.25 for a total of 18 points that were possible out of 25 points. So as a student goes through this term, you know, they're progressing the first assignment, they get 20%, that gives them 14 points, and then they write a quiz. They do well on the quiz, and they get 4 points because they got 80% and it was worth 5%. So by the academic drop deadline, and this is what you should be doing as you monitor your progress in any given courses. Let's say you're on probation right now and you're concerned about how you're going to progress this term. Be proactive, assess, adjust. So by the academic drop deadline, you want to see how you're doing mathematically. In this scenario, the student has 50% of their grade returned. This is their current average based on the percentage and what they were weighted, right? So this student has a 72, they need 65%. So mathematically, they have this many points out of a possible 50, right? 36 points out of 50. So as a question, what would you choose, right? Just think about it. You'd be using the grade calculator. Would you choose to drop the course, right? It's the drop deadline. You need to make a decision, or you choose to stay in the course, right? You can drop it if you wish, but you know, just think about that for now because you're doing 72%, half the grade is returned, you need a 65. So I'm going to say in this scenario, the student chooses to stay in the course, so we go past that academic drop deadline. Student moves forward, term test 2, they get 68, it's worth 25%, 17 more marks. Quiz 2, again, they do well on quizzes. Now, at the final assessment, they now have 80% of their mark returned. This is their new average. So they're still trending pretty well in the course. And now a total of, because 36 points added with these values based on the percentage weighting of the assessments, they now have 57 points out of a possible 80 earned. So now they're passing the course, no matter what happens. Now, of the remaining 20 points, because 80 points or 80% of the mark is returned, of the 20 points to be earned, to get this 57 to a 65, or 65 minus 57, they need 8 more points to get to 65. So 8 out of 20% is remaining for what the final assessment is going to be worth. That means they need to get 40% on the final assessment. So if you were in this situation and it was a course required for program entry and you see how you're doing and you know you've got 20% left to earn and you know how you're going to have to go on the final exam, I just want you to consider, would you take the grade? Would you choose credit, no credit? Or would you late withdraw? Consider taking the grade means you're committing to whatever it is. Credit, no credit means if it was required for program entry and you choose credit, no credit, it won't count for program entry or program completion. And late withdrawal means now you've spent that time and money and effort this far into the term and you're just going to take yourself out. These are all options, but I want you to think about what would you do, okay? So the student proceeds and their final assessment, they pass. They just pass. It was worth 20%. So 50 times zero point 0.2, they got 10 marks. So doing the math, 10 marks plus a 57, they got a 67. So they've got 100% of their mark returned. They have 67. They needed a 65. So if you were thinking about what would you do, the decision in hindsight, but you have to make it by that deadline. In hindsight, the decision in this case would be to take the grade. And I would say with 80% of your mark returned and achieving at least a 71% and knowing that you only really needed a 40% on the final, that's a pretty sound decision to just say, I'm going to proceed and take the grade. And in this case, it worked out for the student. In this next scenario, this is where I want you to do the math. In this case, this course is an elective. Let's say it's a distribution requirement, so it's not required for program. So all you're really thinking about is I need to pass the course. I need to get a 50%. So if you do the math, you can use the grade calculator, or maybe you want to use your phone or however, but I want you to think about, how is this looking in this scenario? I'll show you the math afterwards, but I want you on the other side of the screen to do some of the legwork. So again, you can use the gradecalculator.net, or you can use your phone or a piece of paper to go, okay, 50 times zero point 0.2, 46 times zero point 0.1, 60 times zero point 0.05 to see where you're at by the academic drop deadline. In this scenario, the student has 35% of their mark returned. So you want to think, okay, where am I trending right now in terms of my average? You've got only 35 marks returned, but how many points do you have out of those possible 35? So thinking, okay, in this scenario, the student continues on, and this is what they're earning in the second half of the course or after the drop deadline. So, they're not doing as well in this course, but it's not required for program. But you want to think, if you can do the math here, again, figuring out before that final assessment, again, you have to make that decision to choose credit, no credit, or late withdrawal by that deadline, the published deadline, and the student has 70% of their mark returned. How are they doing? So they've got 30% still left to earn, but being realistic about how they're understanding the course content, how they're going. Maybe they don't do well on tests. Maybe they do better on essays, but the final is a test, right? Long form, short form, multiple choice, whatever it may be. But you want to think, okay, what's possible for me to earn? And is this the right decision for me moving forward? They do need to get to 50 points to pass the course. So determining based on these marks, what's the percentage required on the final assessment? Now, I've deliberately not included the grade on the final assessment to show you, if you guys have an idea of where you're at based on this math, I'll show you on the next slides. So again, going through this, 50, 20%, that's 10 marks, 46, 10%, 4.6, 60, but worth 5%, only 3 marks. So if 35% returned, hopefully this corroborates with what you guys have worked out yourselves. So they've got 17.6. They're just passing this course at this point. So in this case, what would you choose? Would you drop the course? And if you are comfortable putting this in the chat, did you choose to drop the course or did you think about it? Again, if you're comfortable putting it in the chat. I mean, obviously in the scenario, I said the student stayed and continued on, but you may have thought about dropping the course. There's a lot of things to consider, right? Let's say, again, you all chose to stay. So again, moving on, term test 2, there's the math, quiz. Student doesn't have much of, maybe they don't have a facility for the area of study and the subject matter of the course. So now they're at a situation where 70% is returned and they're not quite passing, right? They're not quite there. So, but of the remaining 30 points, they know mathematically to get to 50, again, 50 minus 34.7, they need 15.3 out of 30. So they need a 51 on the final to pass the course. So I want you to consider, would you take the grade? Once you've gotten to this stage, did you decide to take the grade or choose credit, no credit, or choose late withdrawal? Again, this is an elective, so it's not required for programs. So choosing credit, no credit protects your CGPA. That's important for students on probation. Or you could take the grade, so it's going to impact your CGPA, keeping in mind the minimum grades you require to continue on academic probation that we talked about. Or would you late withdraw and then be forfeiting the time, money, and effort that you spent to that date? Okay. So on the final assessment, the mark I didn't include, the student failed. We know they needed a 51, but they got a 48. So their final total was 49.1. They didn't meet the minimum grade. At U of T, we don't round up with a 0.1. That's a 49% that gets reported. So this is a failed course. So in hindsight, one second, the decision would be to choose credit, no credit in hindsight. Again, this is for a student on probation. It's important to protect your CGPA at all costs. If you've gone past the academic drop deadline and you know you're not doing very well, but it's not a course that's required for program, this might be the best way forward. I mean, in this case, the student didn't earn the credit, but they also didn't impact their GPA. So that's very important. Moving on to a topic that we often hear from students who are on probation or suspension is petitions. So I'll just briefly cover this. A petition is a request. It is not a guarantee. It's a request for an exemption from a university rule, regulation, or deadline that applies to all students at the university. So everyone has to abide by the policies and procedures and deadlines. So you're asking for an exception if you're petitioning. We have a few main types of petitions. There's deferred exams, when you miss your regular exam, extension of time beyond the end of term, course overload, exception to policies. Exception to policies typically looks like an exception to the credit no credit deadline. So you're asking for a late credit no credit. Not commonly granted, but that's a common exception to policy petition. Late withdrawal without academic penalty. To be clear, this is not an LWD, it is a WDR. LWDs are dropping it after the drop date, and they're not a petition. Late withdrawal without academic penalty, the WDR, is different. That's a petition. Returning from academic suspension, returning early. Just to be clear, we don't, if you're on a 1-year suspension, the type of petition is a lift of suspension. If you're on a 3-year suspension, the type of petition is an early return from the 3-year suspension. I will say in general, 1-year suspension lift petitions are not commonly granted, and an early return from a 3-year suspension will not be entertained by the petitions team until you have served, in general, at least 1 year of your 3-year suspension. Those are general terms. All petitions, as I say, are requests and they're looked at on a case-by-case basis. So academic advisors can't really comment on whether your case would be granted or not, okay? So how to submit a petition is something you do online. This link there, the QR code and the link at the bottom provides information. We even have a video on how to do that. If you have to submit documentation, which is often required for most petitions, information is provided on that, on how to do that, and what is considered supporting documentation, and also the next steps. If you have submitted a petition for anything, I want you to understand petitions has a huge volume of requests, and our website says decisions can take at least 8 weeks or more. It is taking more than 8 weeks right now for almost all decisions. Okay, so I just want to set your expectation there. And then just to talk about, planning, smart academic planning, things you need to consider. What is the degree you're pursuing? So, then what are the programs you want to take to fulfill that degree? And the programs you wish to pursue, that defines what courses you need to take to complete those programs. Be flexible. Adjust your plans as needed. Often when students end up on probation or suspension, it means something's not working, so maybe it's not the right area of study. So adjust. There is no shame in changing. Um, just consider that. It's just feedback that tells you maybe this isn't for you. Always build a conflict-free schedule. Our office and no one else is going to accommodate you building a conflict into your timetable. Um, Follow important days and deadlines. I think I've said that at least 5 times. That's really critical. Put them in your phone, digital reminders, however, including those dates and deadlines in each course, right? Attend classes. That's valuable. Invaluable. You must do that. Attend your tutorials if that's part of it. Attend office hours with your instructors. Even if you don't have questions, it's kind of good to sit there and listen to other students' questions. Um, Taking a manageable and balanced course load, as I talked about previously, doing a reduced course load can be very valuable. It gives you more time to focus on each course, which should translate to better academic success in each course. Monitoring your progress and grades that we just went through with that exercise. And always, I say, be proactive. It's your best friend, especially if you're on probation or returning from suspension. And of course, you come back on probation when you return from suspension. Being proactive, being preventative. Being reactive can put you in a situation where you might be compromising your CGPA, or maybe you've maxed out the number of courses you can do a late withdrawal after drop date from, or you've maxed out what you can credit, no credit. So you don't want to get yourself locked, right? You want to maintain as much possibility as you can, and being proactive will assist you in that. Again, monitoring your progress. That second link is the grade calculator that we've already talked about. And then the CGPA calculators is the one you can log into from Acorn or the one you can get to from our website. Again, be mindful. CGPA includes all courses taken for a grade. So whether you passed it or failed it, that grade and credit weight factor into your GPA. Courses that you late withdraw from, or you credit no credit, or transfer credits, those courses don't factor into any CGPA calculation. Now, just thinking about program, because I've talked a little bit about maybe you need to think about changing programs. But if you're in a situation right now where you're like, I'm not eligible to request your program of study, post, as you might hear us say, there could be different reasons. One, maybe you haven't earned 4.0 credits yet. So in this upcoming fall winter session, you can work on completing the number of credits you need. And then the earliest you can request a program would be in round one, which always opens up usually the second week of March and closes usually at the end of April. These dates can be variable from year to year depending on how the calendar falls. So these dates are not yet posted for round one next year, but that's what you could work on. Maybe you need required courses that you don't yet have for the program of study that you want to enter. So if you already have 4.0 credits, you will have found by now, if you're enrolled this fall winter, that you needed to add a temporary program or maybe a couple of temporary programs. These are placeholders. They're not programs that you're actually pursuing. They're just you just add them on Acorn so that you can course enroll. So then in this situation, you would enroll in the upcoming fall winter session to get into the courses that are required for you to apply for your program next spring again in round one. And then maybe you're in the third category here where your CGPA didn't meet the cutoff. So again, if you've already earned the 4.0 credits, you would have had to add a temporary program on Acorn. And then in this fall winter, you're going to work to improve your CGPA and then apply again in spring. And then you want to consider exploring your options because maybe what you were running after doesn't seem viable at all. You could be running after a program that has a CGPA cutoff of 3.0 and you're not in good standing. Your CGPA is below 1.5, so that might not be realistic right now. So please consider that modifying your original plan doesn't mean you failed. It's normal for students to change programs. I myself had a big change of heart in university, and it didn't mean I failed. It meant I found something else much more interesting and more of a facility for. So there are some resources here for you to consider if you're thinking about changing what your initial plan was. The Alternative Programs Options Guide, that's really directed at students who are thinking about those Type 3 programs, those competitive programs like computer science or any of the CCIT programs, commerce. So that guide can help you think about what could be other fits for you. Program plans is another tool to show you what programs offer, whether it's thinking about what is the academic side, what is the skill set side, what is the things I'm going to learn outside of the classroom, how does this set me up post undergrad. And then we also, of course, have a whole section on our site for choosing your program with videos there and lots of advice. We also have past videos on previous recordings for choosing your program sessions that you can also view, which will be very helpful, I think. And one of my favorite tools that I use in a lot of advising is Degree Explorer. And on Degree Explorer, there is a tool called Planner. And this is where you can actually or not talk, but prepare hypothetical plans for this is my plan A, but what's my backup plan B? And looking at what courses would count towards that program. Can I get into those courses? What are the prereqs? So it's a great tool. And the link there to learn more about how to use Degree Explorer is there. And I really encourage you to use that as a tool for yourself. Now I'll hand it over to Carrie.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So I mentioned earlier on that one of the things that I do is to supervise the PASS program. So PASS stands for Promoting Academic Skills for Success. And it's a program that was put together back in 2015 to support students who are dealing with some kind of a need to get themselves back on track in terms of their academic standing. So typically students who are either on probation, on a 1-year suspension, a 3-year suspension, or maybe they're trending towards some kind of difference in academic standing like probation. So just next slide, please. So in terms of the PASS program, I just want to break it down in terms of what actually happens in PASS. So we run it through the Academic Skills Center, and the focus is on rebuilding student motivation, helping to demonstrate and model successful behaviors, increasing your awareness of what works, what doesn't work for you academically, but also build resilience. We know that for students who have, in one way or another, not achieved what they wanted to in their time at university, it can be really discouraging. It can be a little bit demoralizing in some cases, but we understand, and many of us will talk about this, whether it's in the PASS program, many of your academic advisors will also talk about the fact that your academic journey isn't linear, that there's often going to be ups and downs, there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be changes, there's going to be adjustments. And I think Kate already spoke to that in terms of some of the changes that may have to happen at different points in your academic career. But that really is about that resilience. So we run the program at the Academic Skills Center in person. And next slide, please. And with the in-person delivery, we run it over 6 weeks of content. Technically, it's over 7 weeks because we do take a break in between, but 6 weeks of content. But it's really important to note that it is non-credit. So even though it is an academic course that we're doing at the Academic Skills Center, you're not getting credits for it. Okay, it is to help you, but this is not going towards your CGPA, not directly at least. So we have a cycle every semester. So our next cycle is coming up next month in October, and then we'll be doing the winter version of PASS, usually the first week in February, and then we do the summer version of PASS starting in June. What will happen is that you will have an intake meeting and you will have an exit meeting, and that will usually be with either myself or my colleague Linda as learning strategists. And the purpose of that is just to learn a little bit about what's brought you into the PASS program, what's happened academically, what were some of the barriers and challenges you faced, so we can begin to think about what are some of the key aspects of PASS that could most benefit you. You'll also find that during PASS, you'll have a 3-hour class session. So I'll talk about the times that are coming up for the fall, but generally it's about 3 hours in length. And during that time, it's not going to be just lectures and us telling you what you need to do differently. It's really an opportunity for you to practice skills, do different activities, and definitely benefit from the peer mentoring that's available in the PASS program, which again, I'll speak about in a little while. You'll also find that we do a lot of reflective writing. So we focus on writing a written reflection after every week of pass. There are also writing diagnostics that we do as well that help you in terms of structuring essays and things like that. I did mention earlier on about peer mentoring. We have senior program assistants who essentially are former past students who have taken the past program. They at one point were on probation or suspension. Now they're in a good standing, or they may actually be in a position where they've actually graduated. But we work with them to support you as students. So they work with you on the activities, but they're also there to just talk about their own experiences. What were some of the habits and strategies they developed as a means of trying to get themselves back on track? So how the PASS program works is this, and I can demonstrate this in terms of where we are right now. So usually at the end of one PASS cycle, that opens up the registration for the next. So there's an online registration on the Academic Skills Centre website, and that will then lead to an intake survey and then an intake meeting. We began our intake meetings for the fall just yesterday. Once you have been accepted into the PASS program, you will be engaged in the following curriculum. So in week one, we talk about study planning and note taking. In week two, we have our academic advisors involved, and they come and support us in terms of talking about many of the things that Kate talked about so far today. And then finally, we also have thesis development and a writing focus from one of our writing instructors. Week three, we focus on exam techniques, specifically focusing on multiple choice questions. Week four, we go to the library and we focus on information literacy, so using our library database and things like that. Week five, focus on numeracy. And then finally, in week six, we focus on wellness and careers. And we have guest speakers from the Health and Counselling Centre, from the Career Centre. Once PASS is completed, assuming you have completed all of the assignments, you've attended all of the classes, we would then invite you for an exit meeting, and you would complete an exit survey, which would match your intake survey. And that would then lead to us sending a list of names of all the students who completed PASS to the Office of the Registrar, to advisors like Kate, who will then be able to see that you have completed the PASS program. Now, I want to make it clear that the PASS program isn't in any way a prerequisite to having your suspension lifted or anything like that, but certainly I know that earlier on, Kate mentioned about petitions and appeals. The PASS program and completion of the PASS program is often a consideration as part of that process. Again, it's not a prerequisite by any means, but it is something that you can use to demonstrate the ways in which you've tried to turn things around if you are considering putting a petition in. We also have a writing consultation, so you'll have the opportunity to work one-on-one with a writing instructor who will be grading your writing assignments, and they will give you specific feedback on areas for improvement for you. And we also have PASS Term 2. PASS Term 2 is the follow-on from this PASS program, and it's really more of a self-directed program for students that have already completed PASS. And it's an opportunity for you to get more independence in terms of meeting with writing instructors and numeracy instructors, working with learning strategists directly. So for students who have completed PASS, but they want to continue to develop their academic skills and their learning strategies, PASS Term 2 is something that is brought in and is by invitation only. So I mentioned earlier on our PASS program assistants. So again, they are senior students who have completed the PASS program, which means that at one point they were on probation, they were on suspension, but they turned things around. So typically they are undergraduate students. And again, they're either currently in good standing or they've actually gone on to graduate. And what the program assistants would do, maybe one slide before this, what the program assistants would do is they actually are very much involved in giving written feedback on the work that you submit, particularly a lot of the reflections that are submitted. They often lead the small group facilitation. So in the PASS program, we do a lot of activities in small groups, and it's often led by our program assistants. Again, which is really important from the perspective of we love to get the opportunity to get their feedback and to be able to give you their expertise and also model good practice. They're also very much involved in the curriculum development. So every cycle, we always review the past program and we look at, what are some of the changes we can make? How can we make this more effective? And we definitely lean on the program assistants for that. So I do want to share a few comments from some of our past program assistants and past participants. So this student says, I feel that this is a great program and should be highly recommended for students at risk and even for students who have nothing to worry about. The past program has made me so much hungrier to achieve my academic goals. I liked how the program assistants were also students who were in PASS and en route to graduating. This program gave me hope that I can eventually be in their shoes and can graduate or be successful despite my suspension. And finally, the experience I had with PASS was amazing. It really helped me to figure out ways to improve my study methods and health. I had so much fun in every session as I met new people and got to bond while learning valuable lessons together. PASS has truly changed my mindset about school and allowed me to be more confident in going back to school. I know that I can now start my semester without any kind of worry. So just to kind of put this in context in terms of why we're gathered here today. So we work very closely with the Office of the Registrar, and we recognize that for students to turn things around, there needs to be a balance between developing and improving on academic skill, but also effective academic planning. And that's often what we're talking about when we bring the academic advisors into our past sessions. And certainly we've been talking a lot about that today in terms of making decisions about your courses, in terms of late withdrawal and things like that. So there is that balance. We have to look at both the academic planning and also the academic skills. And PASS is a really great integration of those two things. So we are beginning to get ready for the running of PASS in October. So we will be launching the fall session of PASS on, I think, on October 8th. And we're going to be looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. The deadline to register is September 26th, which is next week. However, I will say that we have had a really strong response already, and we are already really close to capacity. So if the PASS program is something that you are interested in getting involved in, I would certainly say connect with us as soon as possible. The QR code on the screen, it is a little bit covered by a bit of a block underneath. But the QR code on the screen will take you directly to the website. So if you are interested in joining, do just take a shot of that. The sessions at the moment, we are still working on the schedule, but right now it appears as though we're going to be having sessions on Tuesdays from 1 till 4, Wednesdays from 10 till 1, Thursdays from 1 till 4, and then Fridays from 10 till 1. And as soon as we have closed registration for PASS, so whether that gets to the 26th or whether it's sooner because of the registration that we've already may have hit the limit on, the registration for the winter version of PASS will open up. So you again will submit your information. We will reach out to you when we're doing the intake meetings. Okay, I think I'll quickly just go over this. I know that Kate maybe I'm jumping in here as well. So we have a number of different resources and tools that are available to you. So certainly you've heard a lot about the Robert Gillespie Academic Skills Center, and certainly in addition to the PASS program, we have writing instruction and we have numeracy instruction as well. But you'll see that there's a whole range of other supports. Obviously, you've learned a lot about the Office of the Registrar and the academic advisors. The academic calendar is so key in terms of that decision-making process. Talked about timetable builder and degree explorer, which is huge in terms of, again, making those planning decisions, but certainly also looking at some of the other supports that are available on campus. I always really talk to students, particularly in the intake meetings, about the Health and Counselling Centre, the accessibility services, the IEC, the International Education Centre. There are so many aspects that go into what makes an effective student in terms of being able to achieve your best. Because we know that there are challenges that we face. We face issues to do with finances, issues to do with health, issues to do with visas. And there's so many things that can impact how well you do academically. So being able to tap into the services and the resources that are available is really important. There's not even a comparison. I can say for sure that the students that I've seen that do seem to be most resilient and do seem to achieve their best are the ones that ask for help. They're attending office hours, they're meeting with their TAs, they're meeting with their prof, they're meeting with academic advisors, accessibility services. So please, we do encourage you to actually access all of these. And certainly even the Career Centre, we often think that maybe the career center is something that's a bit further down the line when we're getting ready for graduation, things like that. And the career center definitely plays a role there as well. But even in terms of just thinking about the connection between your career and your program and the choices that you're making with courses, it's really important to have those discussions early, particularly if maybe you're having doubts about the direction that you're going in. Meeting with an academic advisor is going to be key, but certainly even meeting with a career counselor can also be really helpful in just clarifying those next steps. So, Kate, I'll pass it back to you.
Oh, thanks, Carrie. I was gonna say that about the Career Center as well. Their title is deceiving. Career counselors are ideal professionals on campus to speak to when you're uncertain about your program choice. You know, they talk about what are your goals, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what's important to you, what are your values, what are your ultimate goals after undergrad, and how could the right program fit for you. So when I was sharing that slide about other resources to consider, like the alternative options guide and the program plans, that's where you might get some ideas of what you might be curious about or you're uncertain. And in either case, a career counselor is the ideal professional to speak to. So I do encourage that. And just to pick up on the accessibility services, when I first mentioned them and said maybe you don't know what that means, but a student who may have a documented disability or a persistent condition that would require or be eligible for academic accommodations, that's accessibility services. And if you're uncertain about all of that, but you think maybe this might be me, or I don't know, or I don't have a diagnosis, just go to their website and look into that. Because if it is something that's appropriate for you, then by all means, you should have that support. As Carrie said, reaching out for help is the positive. It is a strength. It is not a weakness. And these are all services there to support you who want to see you do well, whether it's your health or your academics or your finances or what have you. So please engage and thank you for coming today because you engaged in this presentation. And just to close this up, we can now open it for questions. If there's been questions going on in the chat, I'm just going to stop recording. Just give me one moment.